evening, everyone. How are we doing? All right, what did we do in the previous class? We covered a couple of very important topics pertaining to something which is very in trend right now. We covered about trends and tools, and we talked about AI and psychology. Today is our last class, and as you guys had dealer's choice, so I had given you all a poll to pick a particular topic from some options, and you all selected psychology of crime and behavior. That was the majority, at least, right? So today we'll be addressing psychology of crime and behavior. Prithvi, that is just the project ka submission deadline. Today is the last class, if I'm not mistaken. Shubham, could you please confirm?
Sorry, can you repeat?
I was asking ki today is the last class, right, for the
Yes, yes,
internship?
yes, yes, it is.
Okay, great. Thank
But
you
they
so
can
much.
submit their project
Yeah, they can
later time.
submit their projects till 30th, no?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, let me share my screen really quickly. Today we're going to be doing psychology of crime and behavior. And I would like a little bit more engagement because we have only like 18 attendees. So if you feel like you want to contribute, if you want to unmute, you can raise your hand. If we have some time, we'll try and arrange that. Okay? Okay, let's do this. Any questions pertaining to your project, we'll put on hold till the last 15 minutes. Last 15 minutes, may I'll address everything. Okay? So, psychology of crime and behavior. Today, we are going to be talking about how do you define crime from a psychological and a legal perspective, because there isn't crime without psychology and there isn't crime without law. Understand some major theories which explain criminal behavior. And this is again just a theoretical, very overview brief, right? So these 2 points are combined, understanding major theories and examining the biological, psychological, social influences. We'll be talking about the dark triad, which is a very important aspect of understanding criminal behavior and criminal psychology. We'll talk about some famous criminal cases because, of course, and then we'll discuss some ethical questions about responsibility, punishment, rehabilitation, right? Before we get into discussing about these cases, we're discussing about crime. I would like to put out some trigger warnings. Today's session is going to be talking a lot about violence and violent crime. So this would include murder, homicide, serial offenders, serial killers, physical assault, manipulation, psychological abuse, antisocial and psychopathic traits. We'll also be talking about the difference between antisocial personality disorder and psychopathy. There's trauma discussion, substance use, death, murder, rape. There are lots of discussions and lots of topics in today's class which could trigger you. If at any point you feel triggered, if at any point you feel like, ma'am, it's getting very heavy, can we take a break? Please let me know. I need you to be vocal so I can understand where we are and so that you have a comfortable experience with the class as well. Right? ठीक है. Okay, look at the 3 scenarios given here. A teenager pirates a movie, a billionaire commits tax fraud, someone steals food to feed their family, and a hacker exposes government corruption. Which is the most serious crime? But before all these questions, let me ask you, who is a criminal? In these 4 cases, who is the criminal? In these 4 cases, who is the criminal? The billionaire, okay, all right. What about the teenager pirating the movie? Is he not a criminal? Isn't that also a crime? All of them are criminals, okay, okay. Um, so if you look at it from a legal definition, all these would be criminals, right? But as Adya is discussing, Adya is mentioning now, which is the most serious crime? You all said the second one is the most serious crime because a billionaire is committing tax fraud, right? Fair enough. Okay. The fourth one is not serious then. A hacker exposing the government's corruption is not serious crime. It's good work. It's moral, not ethical. Okay. The third one is also not serious. The fourth one is something for something good. Okay. But who decides what is good and what is bad? If you are saying कि the fourth one is good, तो मैं तो ये भी बोल सकती हूँ ना कि the teenager is pirating movies because he doesn't have money for a theater, and that's why he needs to go ahead and pirate movies because it's the only way he'll get to watch the movie. I can also say a billionaire committing tax fraud is because he, you know, yeah, I can't justify that in any way. Someone stealing food ka to it's to feed their family, and a hacker exposing government corruption. We discussed about how we feel that it is morally justified, right? But when we're talking about crime, we're talking about harm. It's important not just to understand what is morally justified, but more importantly, at least while talking about law, which deserves punishment. In these four cases, who deserves punishment? The second one. Now listen to the sentence I'm saying. Okay. You're saying that a billionaire who commits tax fraud deserves punishment. A billionaire who commits tax fraud, who's at the hierarchy, at the top of the hierarchy, deserves punishment. Does he get the punishment? Who gets the punishment? The person who's stealing the food for their family gets the punishment. The person who's pirating the movie gets the punishment. Even the hacker gets the punishment. But the crime, which is actually the most serious, which is causing so much of pain, distress, and discomfort to the society as a whole, is not getting a punishment. So, when we are talking about law, psychology, crime, etc., we have to understand and we have to always keep in mind that corruption is there. In every rung of the ladder, there is corruption. Regardless कि अगर आप अच्छे के लिए कर रहे हो बुरा या बुरे के लिए अच्छा कर रहे हो, there is corruption. There is a power hierarchy which establishes who gets what, who gets the death penalty, who gets a 2 week social service thing. Who gets which punishment is also determined by the corruption that is there in the system. Correct? That is why psychology becomes important, because when we're talking about psychology, we're not just saying that, okay, this is a criminal person, this is a person who's committed a crime, and therefore, this is what punishment they deserve. But in psychology, we're also discussing a little bit about why the person commits the crime. Right? Okay. Now, when we come to defining crime, look at the legal definition, look at the psychological definition. The legal definition is straightforward. If you do a behavior which violates laws established by society, that is a crime. वो piracy हो, वो tax fraud हो, वो stealing हो, वो hacking हो, वो kidnapping or burglary, etc. All these things are crimes because they violate laws established by society. Now look at the psychological definition. Crime is an antisocial behavior which stems from complex interactions between individual traits, mental processes, and environmental factors. It focuses on why a person commits an act rather than just the violation itself. So it explores motives, personality, cognition, and learned behaviors. Okay? Now, I would like to, oops, sorry, you can still see my screen, right? Now, this question over here, why is it important to know the why? I want to understand this, right? Why do we need to know why a person does a crime? If does it mean that we are forgiving the person for the crime they've committed? Like psychology का जो definition है यहाँ पे crime का, does it mean we are sympathizing with the person who's committed the crime and saying, you know what, they had a very difficult traumatic childhood, which is why we'll not punish them. It's okay. हो जाता है. Is that what we're saying when we talk about criminology and psychology? Is that why we are involving psychology in this? No, we are not saying that people who have had a difficult past should not be punished or rehabilitated. We're saying that this person had this reasoning for doing the crime. इसके basis पे, let's try and figure out How does the person get punished for the crime? Sure. But is it possible for them to go back to society as a changed person? Is rehabilitation possible? अगर हर इंसान जो क्राइम कमिट करता है क्रिमिनल होता है, that still means that every person has a right to learn and to change, right? Yes, Sahaj, very good. Some people biologically may not have the ability to change their actions. They may not have the potential to learn. That is also something which psychology addresses. That is why it's important for us to know the why. That is why it is important that psychology be a part of criminology, of law. ठीक है? Okay. Let me see the next slide. ये कैसे? Right. You can't see my notes na side में. Can you see my notes, guys? Because those are for me. No, na? ठीक है, cool. So we talked about why people commit crime, right? Now, let's talk about who are these people in this picture. Who's this? This person over here, it's an Indian case. I am hoping you guys know who the person is. The first person here. Who is this person? Have you all heard about the case? Have you all read about the case? There is also a show based on it, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, कोई chat में कुछ है. You can't see my slide? Acha, 1 second. Okay. Just give me 1 second. I'll just get my phone and come so I can read through my notes also because case studies and all are थोड़ा सा important. एक मिनट रुक जाओ. Okay, let me just quickly share my screen again. Can you see the screen now? Can you see this who are they slide? Yes? Okay,
Yes, we
great.
can.
Thank you. Can someone tell me who these people are? Let's go at it step by step. Who is this first person here? Does anyone know who this first person is? This first person, Baba, here, ye wale, before Ted Bundy, there is one more person here. A serial killer. Very nice, Prithvi. Thanks so much. I would have never guessed. Have you all watched that show? That show with the cannibalistic case which was there. Sector. The Nithari guy. Yes, Morbi. Thank you. This is Raja Kolandar. Right? So basically, does anyone know about the case? So his actual name is Ram Niranjan, and he is talked about when talking about the cases pertaining to vulnerable populations because of he is linked to cases of cannibalism and murder pertaining to children. Okay? Now, do you remember which show I'm talking about? What is that show called there? Sector 36. Yes. Thank you, Ananya. Now, a lot of details about his history and his childhood are very less because that is something which happens very commonly while talking about Indian serial killers because हमको परवाह ही नहीं है मतलब हमें परवाह नहीं है कि क्यों किसने क्यों क्या किया है. हमें परवाह है कि किसने किया है तो उसको पनिशमेंट मिलना चाहिए. But it's never as simple as that, right? What we do know is he's linked to a lot of cases, and the stuff that he's done has helped create a criminal profile to understand people who fit in that profiling characters, right? So we'll talk about profiling in the next slide as well. But so this is Ram Niranjan, also known as Raja Kolander, right? Cannibalism refers to the act of eating other people. Okay. Okay. Now, this is someone you must be knowing for sure. You all talked about Ted Bundy. Tell me about Ted Bundy. Chalo. What is who is Ted Bundy and why have I marked him here? So Ted Bundy was a serial rapist and he was known to be super charming. Okay. Was he a serial rapist? Did he rape the people he killed? Was it written anywhere that Ted Bundy was a yes. Thank you, Morbi. He practiced necrophilia. What is necrophilia? Yes, allegedly. Fantastic. Allegedly is a very important word to mention here, okay? Because when people are interviewing serial killers, it's not possible to always believe what they are saying because they are serial killers, right? So they have a way of getting their way done, you know. But what we know about Ted Bundy is he was an American serial killer. He was charismatic. He was intelligent. He was socially skilled. Can you see this face over here? When you look at the face, not a lot of people would think he's a serial killer. Someone would look at him and think this is a handsome man who seems to be able to use his charm to get things done, which is why he's considered as a psychopath, right? These people are essentially called psychopaths. Yes, Ananya, definitely. Bundy murdered numerous women, and he would use charm and deception, and he would use injuries like, oh, I hurt my leg. Can you please help me find the nearest hospital, etc. And then he would gain the women's trust, and then he would kill them, right? Multiple escape attempts he made, and finally he was captured. Now, Ted Bundy, I don't know if you all have ever watched, if you all have watched the Ted Bundy tapes on Netflix. Have you all watched? Has anyone here watched it? So you'll notice in the way the tapes have been described, right, that he did not have any remorse and any empathy at all for the people he killed. He did not think that what he was doing was considered wrong. He perceived it to be an act, which was an act of fruition. He gained pleasure from doing that act, right? So that was Ted Bundy. How many people here know who this is? The third person. Um, Morbi, when we talk about psychopathy, sociopathy, and ASPD, we'll address what you're asking here. But yes, wow, Iram, very nice. Yes, Adya, Morbi, excellent. What did Eileen Warners do? This is a very interesting case, okay? What did Eileen Warners do? Oh, that's okay, no problem. She killed the men who assaulted her. Morvi, let's try and not, generalize the whole diva thing because at the end of the day, it is still a crime, right? That being said, understand her case as well. Okay? She experienced a lot of sexual abuse growing up. When I say a lot of sexual abuse, I am not just talking about a few incidents of molestation or rape. I mean to say that she was abused for most of her childhood life. Okay? Now, she was a lesbian, and back then in the 1950s, 1960s, being a person of the queer community was not easy because the queer community itself was subjugated to a lot of discrimination, which still happens, right? But her life and her case study is discussed a lot when we talk about trauma, when we talk about how a person's childhood and a person's past leads them to get indulged in crime. Has anyone watched the Queen of Serial Killers on Netflix? It's her documentary. See, if you are interested in the topic, if you don't get too attached to it, maybe give it a look. If not, that's okay. Compulsory नहीं है. ठीक है? But Warnos was convicted of killing several men in Florida, and she said that it was in form of self-defense. But the thing is, she was actually working as a sex worker back then. So when she said it was because of self-defense, people did not believe her. People thought that because she is a prostitute and she's working in prostitution, she doesn't have any rights. That is not the case. Consent is consent. A no means a no, right? Even if you're a prostitute, it doesn't mean that people can just have their way with you. Okay? It needs to be a profession which is still respected. If a person says no, it means no. So Eileen's defense was कि मैंने जो किया, it was because of self-defense, right? But of course, the courts did not believe that. they still went ahead and executed her. Okay, all right. This is a very recent case. This fourth picture over here of this couple, Jolly Joseph. This is तो India में हुआ था. She became the central figure for a very well-known case known as the cyanide case. Yes, Morbi seems to know her stuff. Very nice. Cyanide poisoning किया था उसने. Curry and cyanide, yes, serum, very nice. You all know this Netflix and stuff, right? But so basically, what happened is, she was educated, she was responsible, she was trustworthy, and if you look at her picture over here, you won't say na कि अच्छा this is a person who poisoned her whole family. You won't really make that assumption based on how a person looks, can you? In the next slide, we will be talking about if we can decipher what a person looks like and if a person's facial features determine or at least indicate if they're a serial killer or not, which is a very um, interesting part of psychology because it's based on a lot to do with racism and socialism. So we'll get to that. I just watch cartoons. That's okay, Prithvi. See, as again, right, this topic was chosen by majority, which is why we are considering it, which is why we are covering it up, right? So, basically, what happened is over a lot of years, her family members started dying of cyanide poisoning, and they realized that it was because of her, right? There was a lot of family drama and affairs and all those things going on, which is not important in right now ka context. But again, the fact being that on this page, there are three men. I will talk about John Wayne Gacy as well. And there are two women. Does this mean that female serial killers don't exist or are very few in number? Now, I'm not making this a feminism thing, okay? I am saying, however, that people don't attribute crime to women. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed the language people use while talking about crimes done? By default, they say, इस बंदे ने ऐसा किया होगा. अब मैं ये नहीं बोल रही हूँ कि women also should go ahead and become serial killers. I'm saying that there is so much of stigma, discrimination, and patriarchy associated with the field as well. And yes, Samaira is right. Statistically speaking, men do commit more crimes, right? Yes, very true. But what I'm trying to say is we also need to look at it from a social angle because psychology will not exist without sociology. ठीक है. Last person. Who's this? I already mentioned his name, so. Who is this person over here? This clown person? Yes, John Wayne Gacy. He was a businessman. He was an active member of his community, and he was viewed as a very, very respectable and very like sorted citizen. And he was given the nickname, as Iram said, the killer clown. Okay. Now, he murdered a lot of young men and boys in the 70s, and he was arrested in, I think, late 70s when he was arrested. And the reason we talk about his case is because Madhav, I don't remember his case properly because it's been a very long time since I read his case and watched the documentary. But the reason we discuss about his case a lot over here is because of the double life phenomena. He was a very respected member, and he did all his um, killings. I think Netflix pe if you type John Wayne Gacy, you'll find it. He did all his killings in a clown costume to hide himself, right? So he would publicly be a very sorted and very nice, very respectable individual, and then behind the scenes he was someone completely different, right? Now we've talked about these cases. I want to ask you a couple of questions. Okay. Can people who appear socially successful still possess antisocial traits? Wow, I didn't even read the question and I already given the answers. Okay. So someone who is socially successful can still possess severe antisocial traits. Can you think of any person who may fit that category. ठीक है, थोड़ा काफी पॉलिटिकल जाएगा ये क्वेश्चन, so let's move to the next question. Why do people assume that criminals look or behave differently from others? When you think of a criminal, there are certain characteristic features we attach to that person. Why is it so difficult to understand that, okay, a criminal can also be someone amidst us, someone we know of? Why is it so difficult? Yes, movies and limited awareness, Madhav. Their acts are very terrible, so we associate them with monsters, not people who look decent, look normal, or look happy. Right? Like as I was talking about Ted Bundy. Very rarely would you associate him with a crime like this. Jolly Joseph. Very rarely. Right? Right. Okay. Um, this is a very interesting, very important question. To what extent should a person's traumatic history be considered while determining responsibility for their criminal acts? To what extent can we say that a person has had trauma? It's very sad. So let's consider that trauma while discussing which punishment we should give. Interesting, but it depends on the person. But okay, let's say that this has happened. Um, I don't remember the case again. Yeah, multiple personality, multiple dissociative identity disorder का case था एक, and what the person said is that person came out, another personality came out, and they killed or they committed the crime. So who should be punished? If the host is saying that another personality of mine came out and did the crime, who should be punished? Can you punish the other personality? No, right? You will eventually have to kill sorry, you will eventually have to deal with the person, no? The host, right? Ananya, very true. The person should be sent to a mental asylum. They should be rehabilitated. They should be kept aside individually. Very, very true. All these points are true. No doubt. But are you saying that they should not be given the same amount of punishment or at least some sort of punishment like the others who are also criminals? If you're saying that if a person's actions do not lead to, um, a lot of, yes, Vanya, Billy Milligan. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very bad with names sometimes. No? But if you're saying that a person's crime should be like, they should be punished for the crime depending on how much um, harm they've caused others. Crime will cause harm to everyone in some or the other way, right? So then how do we decide to what extent? This is a very, very ambiguous question, guys, because there is no proper answer to this, right? If you're considering a person's trauma, a person's life story, a person's childhood, tab to everyone has gone through stuff in their life. Uh, Kids are serial killers. No, Prithvi, we won't be doing that. Everyone has gone through trauma, to something very difficult in their life, right? You should consider the effects of trauma, sure. But at the core of it, when we're talking about rehabilitation, we're not saying just rehabilitation. We're saying make the person realize their mistake, definitely. But do it in a way कि वो समझ पाए कि I'm getting punished because I did XYZ. Right? Help them understand and realize what they've done. Then only you can rehabilitate them, na? You can't forcefully rehabilitate someone. Right? Okay. Um, okay, I have one more question to ask you all. Don't you think Indian jails are more meant to torture? Oh yeah, Madhav, definitely. Okay, I have one more question, but I think I'll ask it in the next slide. But okay, so you understood the case over here. You understand why I showed you this slide? Like, do you understand why I showed you this slide? Why did I show you this slide? Not just to highlight the sex and sex difference here, but also to highlight the fact that दिखते नहीं है ज्यादातर serial killers. पता नहीं चलता है, right? And the fact that people have a lot of reasons they become who they are, or they do what they've done, rather. Right? So we need to keep space and hold that in mind as well. You can't ignore a person's upbringing. Okay? Okay. Now, when we talk about why do people commit crimes? Firstly, we're discussing about biological theories, right? So we're saying that criminal behavior is not directly inherited, but there are certain traits which can influence our behavior, and these seem to have a bit of a genetic influence, right? Like, for example, the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is associated with planning, it's associated with moral reasoning. So, if there is damage in the prefrontal cortex, as is noticed in a lot of the brains of serial killers, there will definitely be impulsivity, aggression, mood control difficulties, etc. Right? When we talk about neurochemistry, we're saying that there are factors linked with aggression, like substance abuse, excessive stress hormones, right? So we're saying that biology increases the risk, but it is not the only thing. Essentially, you're saying nature and nurture, right? It's not versus nurture, it's and nurture. Social theories, mein, we're talking about the entire aspect of the fact that crime occurs when people can't achieve the goals that they want to achieve. This is called the strain theory. Okay. So it's a very commonly named theory, strain theory, which talks about the fact that poverty, lack of opportunity, inequality, these are things which cause people to commit crimes. Right? Then we're talking about the psychological theory. Madhav, that is exactly why I mean, if the prefrontal cortex is damaged, then of course morality में concern होगा ना. That is why you're talking about the prefrontal cortex. Okay. Then we talk about the psychological theories. We talk about social learning theory. Do you remember Bandura? What did Bandura say? Albert Bandura. You repeat what you see. You see something, you do something. Right? And we talk about operant conditioning. When a person steals one time and they get a reward. वो अगर 10 रुपए भी चुरा ले, चलो, that 10 rupees also means the fact कि wow, I succeeded, right? So they'll want to do it more because it gives you an immense pleasure at that moment, right? Now let me ask you about this last thing. We talked about core beliefs, and we talked about a lot of you know mm, thinking methods, right? Do you remember in the first class we talked about this biases exactly? In this situation, when we're talking about cognitive theories, when we're talking about biases, can you think about what kind of thoughts or distorted thinking a person who is committing a crime might have? The question I'm asking you is, if we're talking about biases and cognitive, uh, you know, distortions, what thinking would a person committing a crime have? Yes, biases, racism, they have twisted ways of justifying. Yes. Very good, Morbi. So they may say stuff like, what, everyone does this, so मैंने भी कर लिया. Or, oh, whatever was happening, I had no choice. Or, oh, she enticed me, right? Or the person on the other end enticed me. Everyone does it. Or, oh, you know what, I saw it on TV. तो मैंने भी कर लिया, मैंने कुछ गलत नहीं किया है. Yeah, she was asking for it. Thank you, Morbi. Right, so we're talking about these things, saying that cognitive theories में जब हम बात करते हैं, we're saying that people who commit these crimes think and rationalize their way out of the guilt. ठीक है? Okay. Now, interesting. Very, very, very well known, well researched part of criminology, psychology, and the psychology of law. We're talking about the dark triad. किसी ने पढ़ा है ये पहले? So, the dark triad is basically traits which are associated with negative human behavior. Okay? This is not actions, but the traits, they are associated with categories. Okay? So they are basically exhibited by people who are deemed to be antisocial. Right? So the first one here is narcissism. What is narcissism? How do we define narcissism? Right? Okay. So it is essentially a concern only with oneself, right? And everyone, so most of the times when we put ourselves over others, we may feel a sense of guilt. People who are narcissists don't feel that sense of guilt. Okay. Um, a common tool used to measure narcissism is the narcissist personality inventory, which mentions about a person's sense of superiority, a person's self-absorption, etc. Now they have a very difficult time forming and maintaining relationships. Why? Because they come from an angle of I am always right. I am never wrong. तो अगर झगड़ा वगड़ा होता है तो वो apologize नहीं करते because they don't think they're wrong. Right? Okay. The second trait here is psychopathy. Guys, you don't have to. So if you don't know the meaning of a word or something like that, that's okay. You don't have to, Google it or chat GPT it and type it out in the chat box, etc. Right? That's okay. You don't have to do that. It's all right. What is psychopathy? Psychopathy is basically a word which is very, very, very frequently thrown around. Very true, right? हर second person बोलता है अरे यार ये बिहेव करता है psychopath. What is a psychopath? Who is a psychopath? Psychopaths are people who lack remorse. Yes, very good, Vanya. They lack empathy and they have a lot of issues with impulse control, right? So it's important to understand that these are aspects of psychopathy which is throughout their life. Like they behave in that manner for a very long time, right? Okay. Now, okay, one second. I'll give you an example. People who are psychopaths can actually go through life by lying, by being very, superficially playing out a good person role, right? So it's difficult to understand if a person is actually a good person or if they are a psychopath. That being said, I am not saying that everyone who behaves very nicely with you is a psychopath. Please don't generalize, okay? The third one, Machiavellianism. What's Machiavellianism? What is Machiavellianism? So, Machiavellianism here is coming from the works of Niccolo Machiavelli. Okay? Does anyone know who Niccolo Machiavelli is? He was a philosopher. He talked about how yes, Italian political race, yes. He talked about how a head of a state should be, how cunning they should be, how, self-obsessed they should be, tactical, and how they should be super self-oriented, right? So, um, in his works, he talked about the fact that आपको जो भी आउटकम चाहिए, it is justified. आप जो भी एक्शन करो, do whatever action you require to reach the outcome you want. Is this always the case? Can you do whatever you want to get an outcome? No, right? You need to have morality. You need to have respect for other people. You need to be able to, have principles of living in a society. So Machiavelli said that forget all those things. Forget all those things. If you want to be the king of a state, if you're required to kill a lot of other people, do it. Now, when we're saying about the dark triad, we're not saying that everybody who has these three will definitely be a psychopath or will definitely be a serial killer. We're saying these are traits which are prominent in people who are serial killers, and these are traits which could lead to becoming a serial killer, or rather, engaging in criminal behavior. ठीक है? Okay. Now, before we start this, let me just pause 1 second. Does anyone have any questions about whatever we've discussed so far? Anyone have any questions about whatever we've discussed so far? We have a couple more slides and then we'll be done with today's class as well. Okay, so some people become serial killers. Oh yeah, definitely. Prithvi, I don't know what you mean by that question. What happens to first of all, तो psycho हम use ही नहीं करते हैं बच्चे, ठीक है? If you're working in the field of psychology, if you're studying about psychology, this word psycho is a very derogatory term. We need to maintain respect for the people that we talk about, right? Even if they are criminals. Self-obsession is different from narcissism, Madhav, because of the intensity. पृथ्वी इंडिया में तो आई कैन टेल यू कि the entire angle of psychology in law is very new. So India में the treatment people get is very bad if you are experiencing mental health conditions and have committed a crime. Abroad there are still systems of parole and rehabilitation, etc. So a lot of differences there. Can we justify rape like we justify other crimes? Morvi, I think being a prosecutor, or rather being a defender of a person who's like in the court of law, being a defender of a person who has committed a crime like rape and being able to defend them is a very immoral behavior, because how can you justify a person who has done something as cruel as this? But that is what lawyers do. Some lawyers do, right? Eventually, if you look at it from the whole profession point of view, उनका काम होता है. Lawyers, if you're a defender, you have to defend the person you are defending. If you're a prosecutor, you have to prosecute them. Right? Committing rape is always a choice. Very true. Clear. Now, we had talked about, can you look at a person and identify if they are a serial killer? Please understand this video very carefully, because it is not just about facial features. It has a very important underlying principle of sociology, very important aspect of how society functions. It's a bit of a lengthy video, but please listen to it, pay attention carefully. Okay?
Could you spot a murderer simply by looking at their face? Take a look at the following people. Which one do you think is the murderer?
Audible hai, guys?
Hey everyone, welcome back to Bear It in Mind. In this video, we're going to start to explore biological explanations of crime. There are three we'll cover in this series: a genetic explanation, a neural explanation, and in this video, a historical approach known as atavistic form. On a dark, cold morning of December 1870, while analysing Brigand Villela's skull, I had a sudden realisation and solved the problem of the delinquency's nature. These were the words of Cesare Lombroso, an Italian scientist in the 19th century. He was describing the moment where he thought he'd discovered a physical way of identifying and explaining criminal behaviour. He was examining the dead body of Giuseppe Villela, a convicted criminal who had gone to prison for theft and arson. What Lombroso spotted was a median occipital dimple in the man's skull, an indentation that looked similar to ones found in lemurs and rodents, and for Lombroso, this was evidence that criminal behaviour was biological. At the sight of that skull, I seemed to see all of a sudden the problem of the nature of the criminal, an atavistic being who reproduces in his person the ferocious instincts of primitive humanity and the inferior animals. In his 1876 book called Criminal Man, Lombroso suggested that criminals were a more primitive version of humans. He formulated his ideas at the time when Charles Darwin had recently introduced the theory of of evolution. And based on this theory, Lombroso suggested that criminals are essentially evolutionary throwbacks to an earlier species who were inferior to non-criminals. This brings us to atavism, or the atavistic form. Atavistic means a tendency to revert to an ancestral type. Atavus is the Latin for ancestor. And for Lombroso, these criminal types could be identified by certain distinctive physical features. Lombroso wrote, "There is an asymmetry of the face, excessive dimensions of the jaw and cheekbones, eye defects and peculiarities, ears of unusual size or standing out from the head as do those of the chimpanzee, nose twisted or flattened in thieves or beak-like in murderers, chin receding or excessively long or short and flat as in an ape." Other physical markers included dark skin and the existence of extra toes, nipples, or fingers. Now, it's important to emphasize here that the cause of criminal behavior.
Prithvi, you mentioned that the background is a bit scary. I'm sorry, I can't change the background of the video. If you are feeling, if you're feeling a little eerie out by it, you can take a bit of a pause, step away from the screen for some time, and then come back when you're feeling a little better. Okay? Anyway, I'll be sharing the video, sharing the PPT, so you can always, access it later on as well when you're feeling a little bit more comfortable. Okay.
Is not because of their face, or the funny looking ears or extra toes. For Lombroso, that's how you identify them. Listen again to Lombroso. These anomalies in the face, when numerous and marked, constitute the criminal type. They are not the cause of the antisocial tendencies of the criminal. They are the outward and visible signs of a mysterious and complicated process of degeneration, which in the case of the criminal evokes evil impulses that are largely of atavistic origin. The explanation, the reason why they commit crimes, according to Lombroso, is because they are genetic throwbacks. They are less evolved, and therefore the behaviour of these biological throwbacks will inevitably not fit in with the rules and expectations of modern civilized society. Now, you might be thinking at this point, what a ridiculous theory. Well, I'm going to show you shortly how even today, with modern technology, the idea that you can identify a criminal by their facial features hasn't gone away. It's still alive and kicking. But just before we get to that, we need to critically think through Lombroso's theory. Did his ideas about atavistic form and facial features just come out of his mind, or did he actually try to investigate this? To his credit, Lombroso developed carefully designed tools to measure body parts with great precision and designed tests to determine sensitivity to pain. He then went on to examine the skull and facial features of large numbers of Italian convicts and proposed that the atavistic form was associated with a number of physical defects which were key indicators of criminality. In all, Lombroso examined the skulls of nearly 4,000 criminals, as well as, wait for it, 383 dead criminals. He concluded that 40% of criminal acts are committed by people with atavistic characteristics. So there you have it, definitive proof for the atavistic form. Not so fast. There are many problems with Lombroso's research. Firstly, it was correlational. This means that his research investigated a relationship between physical defects in the face and the skull and criminal behaviour. However, there is a lack of control of variables in such research, which means that it cannot be said that this research demonstrates that atavistic form is the cause of criminal behaviour. For example, some have argued that the physical defects could have been the result of poor nutrition in childhood, and criminal behaviour such as theft could be explained in terms of environmental factors such as poverty. Secondly, there was no control group in his research. Lombroso found these physical defects in the group of offenders, but he did not have a group to compare them with, a group of normal, non-criminal people. It could be that the physical defects he identified were actually not that abnormal from the average population. In fact, Goring in 1913 carried out a study that compared over 3,000 London criminals with a non-criminal control group and did not find evidence of an atavistic form in the criminal group. In other words, there was no difference between the two groups in relation to Lombroso's theory. Despite these criticisms, Lombroso has been praised by some as the father of modern criminology. This is because he was the first person to make crime and criminals a specific area of study, which has led to much improved theories of offending that we have today. In fact, if someone studies criminology at university, usually the first lecture is on Lombroso himself. Some have also suggested that in trying to describe how particular types of people are likely to commit particular crimes, it was the beginning of offender profiling. He was the first to tell the police that criminals had a distinctive set of characteristics that could help narrow down the list of suspects. However, one of the major ways Lombroso's theory has been criticized is for being biologically deterministic. This is because his theory states that the cause of criminal behavior is because of an uncontrollable inborn biological factor. A person is a genetic throwback, a less evolved person. This implies that a person has no choice over their behavior, which flies in the face of the free will argument. It can lead people to blame their biology for their behavior. In this case, if someone committed a crime, they could argue that it's not their fault. It's not their responsibility because they can't do anything about their biology. But if someone stood up in court and used that as their defense, the judge would still say, you are responsible for your actions and so you will bear the consequences. In other words, a purely deterministic view is at odds with the justice system and society's understanding of responsibility. Finally, Lombroso's atavistic theory has been criticized for its scientific racism. This is because, as we saw earlier, part of Lombroso's description of the criminal form included things like dark skin, and some have argued that some of Lombroso's descriptions of the criminal type had racial prejudice. This led to the negative stereotyping of certain groups of people based on their appearance, leading to discrimination. His theory also led others to use it as support for eugenics. This is the theory that a population could be improved by controlling reproduction to increase the number of desirable inherited characteristics. In other words, some people are born with genetic weaknesses and some with genetic advantages, and to benefit society, those with the genetic weaknesses should be eliminated to improve the genetic quality of the population. And lastly, one of the major problems of his theory is that it can lead to people like this being overlooked. This was Ted Bundy, a serial killer, who lacks the features that Lombroso suggested and was reported as being handsome and charming. When Ted Bundy was arrested, people were shocked because he didn't look like a serial killer. Remember those people from the start of the video? Who did you pick as the murderer? This man was a serial killer, and so was this guy. How many of Lombroso's features do they have? So has the world of criminology moved on from the work of Lombroso? Well, yes. As we'll see in the next videos in this series, there are more developed biological understandings of crime, as well as theories around personality and other factors. But Lombroso's ideas haven't completely gone from our modern day. Check out this controversial study carried out in China in 2019. The researchers gathered ID photos from nearly 2,000 people, many of whom were non-criminal, ordinary citizens, but over 700 of the photos were of convicted criminals. They used these photos to train a computer algorithm of what to look for, and according to their findings, the algorithm was able to correctly identify other criminals 89% of the time using only their facial features. Now that's a scary finding. In the next video, we're going to explore whether there is a
Chalo. So, can you look at someone and identify if they're a serial killer? But are there certain facial features which are similar in all serial killers? That could be racism for non-criminal. Yes, some features, sure. Their behavior, definitely, Lavanch. Interesting, right? We can profile people based on their behavior, based on traits which are consistent in a particular group of people. We can't be like, acha, iski aankhein choti hai, so he must be a serial killer. Or, oh, she's very tall, so she must be a, person engaged in crime. You can't do that, right? There is a lot of other angles associated with serial killer and other behaviors which are not pertaining to their physical features, right? Okay, all right, let's carry on. I think we can get more from their expressions. Yeah, definitely. Madhav, see, that's the thing, right? A dark triad का भी जो traits है, they are traits. They exist in people in different intensity. Yes, the study is definitely heavily biased and racist, Samira. Even the one which was done, like, the most recent one, which was shown in the last part, is also quite racist. But I would encourage you to read through it either way. Right? Okay. Now, no, this is not. This is an article actually. But before I share the link of the article, I want to ask you, just a second. What is your understanding of these three words? Psychopath, sociopath, and antisocial personality disorder. What is your understanding of these three words? What does it mean to be a psychopath, a sociopath, and a person who has ASPD? ठीक. I have sent an article in the chat. It will take you roughly 3 minutes to read. Just do a quick little glance through and come back. ठीक है? It's 8 o'clock. 8:02 तक आप read through कर लो, फिर वापस आ जाओ. Because I want to ask you what is the difference between a psychopath, a sociopath, and a person who has ASPD. Okay? 2 minutes, okay, guys, because we are running thodu sa late. Meanwhile, if you know what is the difference between these, please let me know. See, guys, what you are saying is not wrong. जो chat में लिखा है, आप लोग बाद में पढ़ लेना अगर आपको चाहिए तो. But please understand one thing, and I can't explain this enough. Sociopath is a word which is used very casually for someone who has antisocial personality disorder. At the end of the day, this has to do with a variety of ways that we use language. ठीक है? Sociopath is not someone who has no regard for society. A person with ASPD is someone who has no regard for society. हम उनको बुलाते हैं sociopath because हमें पता नहीं कि उनको ASPD people बुलाते हैं. We don't know that there is another terminology that is used for them. We don't know the name of the disorder. Right? So, just like we used to use psycho as a word earlier on, right? Because we thought कि अच्छा normal ही तो है. But नहीं है normal. A person is not a psycho person, right? It's a very hurtful term. At the end of the day, psychopathy is true. They are good at maintaining an innocent image. They are cold, calculated. They are very social. They, go ahead and sort of engage with people. They can hide who they are very well. Sociopath is a word which is used by a lot of people casually for people who have antisocial personality disorder traits. Morvi, antisocial personality disorder traits here is not see, what you're explaining here is actually more to do with introversion. Antisocial personality disorder is a type of disorder wherein people have a lack of connection with the well-being of other people, a lack of interest in their safety, more of a persistent, focus on their own self, etc. Right? Ananya, Perfect Sun, yes. Not read that book, but yeah. So again, right? Please remember, psychopathy, sociopathy, and ASPD are not the same thing. Sociopathy is not. Please remember, it is not a clinical diagnosis. Antisocial personality disorder is a clinical diagnosis. Psychopathy is a clinical diagnosis. Okay? That is the major difference in this. Okay. We're going to have a quick debate now. Okay? I just want to hear your opinions and then we can carry on. Criminals are made, not born. True or false? True. True. Okay, so you're saying that biologically there is nothing which would cause a person to become a criminal. Biologically, there is nothing which would cause a person to become a criminal. Nothing that can't be prevented. Very good. Maybe genetic as well. Right? Okay. This is something we discussed earlier on, right? What about this? Psychopaths should be identified earlier in life. False. Interesting. How do you identify a psychopath early in life? Like what? I mean, how is it possible? If you go and speak to a kid, do you have any of these traits? वो बच्चा है, उसका मॉरल सिस्टम अभी तक बड़ा नहीं हुआ है, उसको पता नहीं है, ठीक है? It develops over the years. Very good, Ananya. Very true. Rehabilitation is more important than punishment. Rehabilitation is more important than punishment. So everyone can be rehabilitated. Is that what you're saying? They should go hand in hand is a very diplomatic answer, Morvi. I'm asking for a yes or no. This is interesting. I'm asking for a yes or no. Rehabilitation is more important than punishment. True or false? Not everyone is redeemable. Who decides who's redeemable, Morvi? Their actions decide. And in a lot of countries which are governed by the law decides. Right? So we should give it a try and then decide. Okay. Okay, the fourth point we discussed now, but let me just ask you one question, okay? Let's say a person has the crime can't be reversed, the criminal. That's interesting, Mother. Very interesting, right? But let's say that a person has a dissociative identity disorder. Another personality of theirs commits a crime. Do we go and tell the victim's family that, yeah, I'm so sorry, another personality committed the crime, तो अभी उसको rehabilitate करना पड़ेगा, कुछ कर नहीं सकते. Do we tell them that? No, na, तो rehabilitation is important, definitely. But there has to be some sort of remorse or some sort of guilt towards the person who's suffering the loss, right? So, as Morbi mentioned earlier, it does go hand in hand. But more importantly, there has to be something that needs to allow the victim's family to gain some sort of closure. Yes, Aradhya, that's what I was talking about, right? There has to be something that needs to help them get some sort of closure. If you tell them that the person who has committed the crime is, being rehabilitated, their immediate reaction would not be, oh, that's so nice. Their immediate reaction would be, what happened to the person who died? My family member died, my friend died, my partner died. उनका क्या भूल जाए? नहीं, right? So there has to be a way in which the victim's family gets some sort of respect, some sort of closure as well, no? ठीक है. Myth or fact? Most crimes are committed by people with a diagnosed mental illness. Myth, fact? Myth. Very good. Straightforward. Fact. It's more of a myth, guys, because mental illness could be anything, right? They could be talking about schizophrenia, they could be talking about depression, conduct disorder, etc. also. No? So it isn't compulsory कि everyone who has a mental health disorder will commit a crime. Okay? Serial killers are highly intelligent masterminds. Fact. See, guys, this is not always the case. Okay? A lot of the times, what happens is the first time a crime happens by the person, it happens in a fluke, and then they're like, wow, I've gained something from this experience. Let me engage in it more. Movies, maybe we overpraise the serial killer. Oh, he's so smartly, he's making all his decisions. She's, doing this in such a clean, particular way. Wow. Not always. Serial killers are not always, highly super intelligent, etc. Yeah? Childhood trauma can increase the risk of later criminal behavior. True or false? Yes. Often. It can increase, but not all. Doesn't mean that everybody who has childhood trauma will go ahead and become a serial killer. Okay? Many offenders justify their actions through distorted thinking patterns and rationalizations. Fact, myth. True. Very good. Fact. This is interesting. Psychologists can accurately predict with certainty who will become a criminal. Very big myth. Okay? There are always things which are outside the person's control. Psychologist is not a future teller. What motivates certain criminals? Vanya, I can see you have certain questions and I'll address them. Let's keep it for the end of the discussion, right? Because I just want to complete the content first before I get distracted by the flow. Most individuals who experience difficult childhoods do not become criminals. Myth, fact. Middle. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I would actually, if you all are interested in understanding about psychology and law, I will, I would recommend this Netflix docu-series called I Am a Killer. It's I've been watching it quite rigorously now, but it's a very, very detailed and a very holistic perspective of what happens when a person is put in jail for a crime and how people cope with it and how what people think about it, etc. Right? Okay. Now, criminal psychology and the law. Psychology asks this very important question. Did the person who was doing the wrong understand what they were doing wrong? It puts the onus on the fact कि hey, if a person understands कि उन्होंने जो किया है वो गलत है, then we can say that the person is psychologically aware of what they're doing. Right? Now, when we talk about criminal psychology and law, there are two words which go here hand in hand. Actus reus and mens rea. Does anyone know what these words stand for? Morbi, we'll come back to this question in the next slide, okay? Actus reus refers to the behavior which is guilty. That you engaged in a behavior which is harmful, which is considered a crime. Mens rea is the mind that is guilty, or the awareness that yes, Morbi, excellent. What I've done is a wrong thing, guilty conscious, right? So, let's say, hypothetically, by mistake, I commit a crime. I injure someone very badly, but it was not my intention. What should happen to me? Hypothetically, I injure someone. It was not my intention. What should happen to me? Still get punished. That is essentially what the current law is based on, right? कि अगर आपका intention नहीं था ठीक है, but crime तो हुआ ना. You have to have some sort of punishment. Should someone who cannot understand the trial be allowed to stand trial? Should someone who cannot understand the trial be allowed to stand trial? Madhav, that's exactly what we were talking about. The fact that the harm has happened and that's why a punishment is required. How can someone not understand the trial? Let's say there is a person who has a intellectual disability and they've committed a crime. They have not known what they were doing. They can't understand the trial. Should they stand at the trial? Should they be allowed to fight in the trial? They must be sent to rehab instead of proper punishments. Yeah, excellent points, right? Okay. What about this one? Should society prioritize punishment or treatment? We've discussed this a lot. We've talked about the fact that rehabilitation is very important, but then the punishment part also needs to be there. And we've talked about the fact that it has to go hand in hand. Punishment plus treatment. Correct? Okay. Treat those who can be treated, punish those who have no remorse. Morbi, essentially, if you look at it, ASPD is also a personality disorder, right? So that is also not within their control. Not being able to feel remorse is not within their control. So should they be punished? Should they be treated? What should happen to them? अगर बंदे की का नेचर ही वैसा है कि पैदाइशी ही उनको प्रॉब्लम होता है in understanding emotions and regulation, etc., what should happen to them? So essentially, what we are all agreeing is the fact that it should go hand in hand, right? अगर आप किसी को पनिशमेंट दे रहे हो उनको ट्रीटमेंट भी दो कि वो रिहैबिलिटेट कर पाए, बिकॉज अ पर्सन्स लाइफ डज नॉट, मतलब दे शुड ऑल्सो बी एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड एंड लर्न द गिल्ट, राइट? सो दैट इज स्टैंडिंग ऑन द इंसैनिटी डिफेंस. अच्छा, व्हाट इज क्रिमिनल प्रोफाइलिंग? What is criminal profiling? The video we watched earlier, right? Thank you, Morvi. Fantastic point. They're conditioned to be empathic. They should be taught to be empathic. They should to have morals because ASPD is bad for them as well. They may not understand that ASPD is bad for them, but at the core of it, ASPD also comes out of insecurities and causes the person who has ASPD a lot of pain as well, right? We're talking about criminal profiling. Criminal profiling could be defined in a wide variety of ways, but most importantly, it's trying to understand if there are any traits or any sort of structure or personality traits, like we talked about psychopathy, narcissism, Machiavellianism, right? Understanding if there are any sort of factors which could result in a person becoming a criminal in the future. Make sense? Okay. Before we move to the next slide, can someone tell me 3 points so far that we have discussed which could indicate possible crime in the future? 3 points in a person which could indicate possibility of crime commitment in the future. Lack of empathy, Machiavellianism, narcissism, okay, behavior, no remorse, past trauma, genetics, childhood trauma, psychopathy, narcissism. Guys, don't tell me the dark triad. Of course, we discussed about those things. Madhav, again, what did we discuss about sociopathy? We understood that it's a term which is used very casually for people who have ASPD, right? So we won't be using the term like sociopathy. We will be discussing about ASPD. So that's why we are using the term ASPD, not sociopathy. Lack of impulse control, very good, Anuga. Right? So this is essentially what a criminal profiling looks like. Now we're moving to a very important question. If psychology shows that biology, trauma, upbringing, peer influence, mental illness, brain development, all of this affects behavior, where should society draw the line between understanding a crime and excusing a crime? Please, before you immediately start answering, read the question properly and understand the weightage of this question. If there are so many things which influence and affect our behavior, what should be the line between understanding a crime and excusing a crime? We're not talking about punishment here. We're talking about forgiveness. We're talking about the humanity of a failure or and rather an act which is bad. Aradhya, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to elaborate on that. What do you mean by that statement, please? A crime should not be excused in the first place. What if a person is in self-defense and what if a person hurts someone in self-defense, hurts them very badly? Is that a crime? Let's see. Punishment can be swapped for correction or rehab, but crimes need attention to them, and so do criminals, whether they feel guilty or not. We need to understand what goes on. We need to treat them with dignity, no matter what they did. Someone who is mentally sick cannot rape a person or do that in self-defense. No, Radha, that's not what we're discussing here. I'm asking you that if a person is committing a crime, and if we know that there are so many things which influence that crime, should we focus more on understanding why they committed the crime, or should we focus on forgiving them for the crime? That's the question I'm asking you. That's the question is asking you. Yes, Morvi, excellent. Understanding is more important, okay? See, guys, at the core of it, it's very important that I end this discussion on a note which is a little neutral. Society is a group of people. A group of people makes society, and a group of people breaks society. As human beings, it may not seem like we owe anyone anything, but we do owe each other life. We do owe each other respect. Basic respect. Okay? When we fail to show that respect to the people who we owe that respect to, when we fail to be human beings living in a collectivistic society or an individualistic society, when we fail to act human, it is important that we learn what we did and why it is harmful for other people. Our intention may not be to hurt the person, or our intention may be to hurt the person. But the thing is, the hurt has been caused, right? So definitely the victim deserves an apology. The victim deserves, the family deserves some sort of a closure, some sort of remorse. But that person who committed the crime may also want to continue going back to society and learning about the fact that what they did was wrong and they won't do it again. So essentially, we need to have measures to prevent crime from happening at all. All this while, in the past 1 hour, 21 minutes, 22 minutes, no one talked about this. No one said कि मैम crime होने से रुकवाना चाहिए पहली बात तो. How can we stop crime from happening? We can surely have more stricter rules and regulations, ठीक है. But we need to have more emotional connection with each other. We need to have more sense of understanding towards each other. We need to have an environment people can talk about their feelings instead of acting their feelings out. And right now, when I'm talking about this, it may seem very, theoretical and fancy. But this is the truth, guys. People who experience rehabilitation after the crime they've committed, they are able to describe and talk about the fact that the reason I was able to relearn my life is because I was in therapy, because I was with someone who understood it, because I was in groups. So many people have gone to prison after a crime that they've done, and they have felt remorse, felt guilt, they've turned to God, or they've turned to some bigger purpose. So the core of it is we need to engage people in helping them understand that if you're experiencing some sort of distress, rather than acting it out, talk it out first. At least know that you're not alone. Right? Okay. So that brings us to the end of our class and of our internship. Okay. All right. We have 3-4 minutes pending in the session. Anyone has any questions about the project or anything we covered in the whole, you know? Thank you, Marvi. That's very sweet. If anyone has anything they want to clarify or anything that they want to, get some give me some feedback on, I would really appreciate that as well. Oh, yeah. Ananya, I sent a report का format. I think I sent a report. Uh, Morvi, the project का deadline is 30th को submit है करना है, last date है. What do we do after the interviews are conducted? Trisha, I've sent like detailed instructions about that also. Project को via link submit करना है. Word में चलेगा, Madhav, that's okay. But the thing is, I've sent a sample report, like a full-fledged proper report, जो मैंने ऐसे sample में ही बनाया है. But you can refer to that as bit of an outline. Essentially, it's more to do with the summaries of your review of literatures and and the summary of your responses for the interviews, right? Okay. That being said, I will also put in my email ID over here. If you have any questions, sairakrassil@gmail.com. And if you want to learn more about my practice, or rather, learn more about psychology, which I post a lot on Instagram about it, you can also check me out on Instagram. But please, if it's something formal, or if it's something to do with studying or internship or anything like that, आप email भेज दो, मैं email और देखती हूँ. Can you recommend me some book? पहले तो आप कर लेना please, because I think शुभम सर ने भेजी होगी. Ananya, again, right? Prefrontal cortex का part comes in over here with this question, na? कि the prefrontal cortex is associated with moral reasoning and emotional reasoning, etc. as well. So, an inability to experience that sort of remorse could mean कि there is an issue with the prefrontal cortex. ठीक है? Thank you, Madhav. Not always. Not always. Sometimes it's also learned. Yes, Aradhya, many times. Um, the deadline is 30th June. Ananya, coming back to your question, not always, right? Sometimes a lack of remorse is something which could also be learned. Like, let's say that a person sees their parents engaging in harmful behavior towards each other, domestic abuse, for example, and then the next day they just wake up and they just carry on with their life. So the kid will grow up thinking कि अच्छा इसमें तो कुछ बुरा है ही नहीं, कुछ बुरा मानने का, कुछ गलत किया ही नहीं है. So then they'll, yes. What's your favorite serial killer case? It's an interesting question, Morvi. I don't know. Honestly, I've been reading a lot about it, and I've, you know, watched a lot of documentaries and also it's difficult for me to um answer that question. But mostly the reason I'm engaged in this sort of field is so that I can understand more to do with the ethics part of it and the morals part of it and the psychology part of it more. Right? So there's that. Can survivors of sexual assault be responsible for sexual assault? Very complex question, Madhav. I don't think we have the time today to address it. What motivates to leave behind clues deliberately? Deliberately. I've not really come across any case like that, Vanya. Um, okay. It could also be um that Vanya, it could also actually be a way of taunting the system. Like sometimes they leave these clues and they still are able to tackle the system and get away. Okay? So one could be they want to get caught. The second one could be the fact that they just want to tease the system, mock the system, and move ahead. What's a short piece of advice you would give to your teenager version? Manage कर लेंगे यार. Life is full of ups and downs. We learn from the downs, we celebrate the ups. And oh wow, Madhavi. I don't know. I'm not very sure of that question, but more often than not, it's to do with the fact of being able to manage your fear. Like when you watch these documentaries, you learn about how serial killers behave, and then you can prepare yourself and like protect yourself. That is the basic ideology behind it. But yes, Madhav, I would give my teenager version the advice that you'll figure it out. Life is so much more than just our failures and our successes. It is also the small moments in life. It is so much more than just education and experience. It is so much more to do with it has to do with the aspect of being and living life to the fullest. तो उस पे focus करो. And please be kind to everyone. You don't know, you never know, guys. You never know what's going on in the other person's mind. Being kind is very simple. If you have the ability to, if you have the capability or the presence of mind to be kind to someone, please be kind. Really simplifies life. Is rape a crime that can't be explained through all the things we learned relating childhood trauma? Because rape is the most cruel crime, I believe. Again, right, Sumaira, I think similar to the question that Madhav asked earlier, it's a very complicated question, so we may not be able to answer it right now because it's already 8:30 and I don't want to start up conversation which we won't be able to wrap up. Right, so I would suggest reading on it if you're interested. ठीक है? Okay. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I am very, very thankful and appreciative of all the work and engagement you all have shown. Very eager to see your projects. And hopefully, I'll see you next year as well. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining session. I mean, joining the internship, though.
Yeah,
I would really appreciate like if you guys share your feedback
that would be
for
nice.
this session and for all sessions.
It would
You guys
really
can,
help me a lot
yes,
also.
yes, help us both of us actually. You can share it here. You can share it on WhatsApp wherever you want to do it. Do it. Else you can do it personally. You can share it with Sarah as well as on her email ID. Yeah.
You can
All
share it on
right.
any like WhatsApp and all also because I will ask Shubham anyway to send me the feedback.
All right.
ठीक है. But thank you so much again. And it was great time interacting with you all, learning from you all and teaching you all. I hope to have more engaging sessions, engagements like this. All the best. Take care. Thank you so much, Shubham, for all the consistent support you've shown.
I was off for two sessions. All right, guys. This is it from our side, and thank you so much for joining. And tata, bye bye, adios. The new word I learned. Peace.